This podcast is proudly brought to you by Paul's Strength Book, an app for everyone. For less than $2 a day, you can have full access to weight training programs, nutrition, recipes, macro calculators, video library, and you can also track all of your metrics including weight, measurements, strength, and performance. Search for Paul's Strength Book in all good app stores now. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paul's Body Engineering Podcast. Today, another solo episode, and I've taken a bit of a humorous route in terms of what I'm going to talk about today, because through just general conversation, a lot of the ideas for my podcast come up in just general conversation with either clients or colleagues or even my beautiful wife, and this one, the topic sort of came about through a couple of conversations that reflected back on some funnier times that we had. And what I'm going to talk about today is some of the dumb things I've done when it comes to diet and nutrition. And upon reflection, some of them are just downright stupid. But at the time, I didn't know any better. And that's the funny thing. And obviously, I want to put a disclaimer out there. There's no fault of anyone's for some of this stupid stuff that I'm going to list in this podcast, simply because at the time, and I'm going back, 10 plus years in some instances, you just didn't know any better. The health and fitness industry as a whole has evolved and come a very long way in a very short space of time, and it has been backed by a lot more science, a lot more research. Therefore, we have a greater understanding of what works and what doesn't. But also as a coach, as a professional athlete, and as just a health and fitness enthusiast, I personally have come a long way as well, and I've obviously done my due diligence when it comes to education, experience, qualifications, being mentored, all those sorts of things. So, it is really funny to sort of go through this list, and I've written a list on my phone that I've got in front of me, and some of the things that I've done really do put a smile on my face in relation to just what people would think nowadays, and that's kind of what it is. It's like training methodologies in professional sporting environments or anything like that. Like what you used to do, 30 years ago, you wouldn't do today, because there's a lot more beneficial ways to do it. But without me rambling on too much more, I'm going to go through each one and just give you a bit more context around the situation as well, because there's certainly some funny ones here. So I remember I used to live in London, in England, back in the early 2000s, and as a typical working holiday person, backpacker, etc., I stationed myself in London and obviously did a lot of travel. Didn't obviously earn a lot of money. The point of going over there was the experience. And over the Christmas New Year period with my friends, we generally go on a ski trip, because it was obviously quite easy to do so. Europe was only a hop, skip, and a jump away. And I remember one year, I can't remember which location we ended up going to, but leading into it, knowing that I'd already booked it and it was coming up, I wanted to, for some unknown reason, bulk up. And that was the methodology. Simply, I just wanted to put on some size, thinking that, I don't know if it was because I wanted to impress women or I wanted to be stronger on the ski slopes. I can't remember because it was so long ago. But I do remember wanting to put on some muscle, and I was working in a place where they actually had a gym in the building. So I utilised the gym in the evenings. Now, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue regarding lifting weights or anything along those lines. So I think from memory, I was in and out of the gym within 20 minutes, first and foremost. So that there obviously didn't promote any sort of muscle stimulus or intensity. But second to that, my dieting strategy to put on some weight was simply this. Every meal was going to be, well, actually, I lied because breakfast isn't included in this, but lunch and dinner was going to be potato, tinned ravioli, and tinned baked beans. And that was it. And I ate that for about 3 months straight, lunch and dinners. And as much as I reflect on it now with humour, at the time I was dead serious. Like, I thought I was bulking up. I thought I was eating heaps of food. I thought the food was going to be very, very supportive. But when you think about it now, like, there's minimal protein in that, okay? The ravioli obviously had a little bit of meat in it, but bugger all. Potatoes, they're still a staple of mine now, but it was just carbohydrate density, and the nutritional value in those foods were minimal at best. Especially given it was highly processed tin food. The potatoes are obviously fresh, but the ravioli was out of a tin, and the baked beans were out of a tin, and they were the cheapest I could find as well. Like, living on a budget back then, you'd obviously go cheap, right? So I think from memory it was about 9p a tin, which, if you go cent for cent, dollar for dollar, that's like 9 cents Australian, which you can't buy anything over here for 9 cents now. But back then, that was super cheap, and that just obviously was my strategy for 12 weeks. And look, ironically, I didn't have a scale where I was living, so I had no idea other than visual if I was actually putting weight on or not. Like, I was putting 20 minutes into the gym, I think 4 or 5 days a week, and I was just eating rubbish food, and in point of fact, it probably still wasn't enough. Because I was so poor, I wasn't having obviously mid-morning or mid-afternoon snacks. There was very little protein in my diet, and for some strange reason, I'd come up with this idea through no other means. It's not like I researched it or saw it on Facebook or anything. In fact, Facebook was quite minimal back then. I just decided to eat ravioli, baked beans, and potato for 3 months, and that's my story. it's just stupid. So let's move on. So that was probably my earliest memory in relation to, just a dumb thing I've done in relation to nutrition. Now, when I got back home from overseas and, several years fast forward, due to the breakdown of my marriage, I had to live at home for a while. And I established contact with my gym. So I started going back to the gym, and I was going late at night. Like, I was going after dinner, so 7:30 p.m. at night time. So I'd go down for about an hour. Again, no program, no strategy around my training, and all I did was chest and arms. That's all I did. Oh, geez, I must have, some people must have thought, what the hell is this guy doing? Because there's nothing to his repertoire other than some incline Smith machine presses, maybe some dumbbell presses, and then some arm curls, and then he's out. And then to support that, because Woolworths was literally probably 100 meters from the gym and on my way home, I'd swing in there most nights and I'd grab a large bag of Maltesers and a 1 litre chocolate up and go. And then I'd go home, and because I was living with my parents, I had a room, I had TV in the room, so I'd go home and put a movie on and eat a bag of Maltesers and drink close to a litre of up and go. And I actually put on a reasonable amount of weight in that time, and you can imagine why. Maltesers, fat and carbs, up and go, fat and carbs. And yes, there was obviously some protein in it as well, but nowhere near enough to warrant muscle. So I was just putting on fat. So I was just getting fat, basically. And I did that for I don't even know. It would have been several months, I think. Just thinking I had to eat. I just had to eat, There was no other strategy behind it. So it really made me laugh. Or it makes me laugh now, I should say, because back then I was adamant. And then I was one of these idiots that would go into the gym and stand on the scales, fully clothed with shoes on, 3/4 of the way through the evening after having eaten dinner, and weighing myself thinking that I'm putting on weight. When in point of fact is I'm weighing myself, the weight that's gone up is obviously what I've eaten that day, the water I've consumed, all the movement I've done. But I'm reading it as gospel, saying, I must be going up. So, just, again, stupid shit, but at the same time, you don't know what you don't know, right? And obviously, there's a large population out there that are probably in a similar situation, not knowing anything more than what's available to them at that point in time, or their own existing knowledge. I was that person. Then I moved forward into, I got into early stages of the fitness industry, working as a PT and things like that. My nutritional knowledge was zero, basically, but I was learning how to train properly. So that was one good thing. But in terms of, eating, I just didn't have the knowledge. Now, I remember starting to actually be a bit more organised with my food. So I'd prep meals out. I'd cook up, from memory, it was 2 chicken tenderloins. I'd go for, I think, a third or a half a bag of microwave brown rice, and then 2 sticks of broccolini. And I'd make that for lunches throughout the day, and that was my meals. So I'm thinking, oh, well, I'm eating clean now. I'm eating good. Why is my body not changing? But what I didn't think of, and I for some reason, I don't know if my subconscious took over or whatever, I remember distinctly one time, I went home and I was so hungry that rather than waiting for dinner, while I was cooking dinner, I went through a third of a tub of peanut butter, and it didn't even faze me. I didn't even click onto the fact that peanut butter is purely fat, like that's the highest macronutrient in it, and I was eating way more than one serving, 1 teaspoon. It would have been several tablespoons, simply because I was hungry at the time. And then I'd go and have my chicken and broccoli for dinner. It was just, again, upon reflection, and obviously hindsight's a great thing. It was just stupid decisions that I'd made purely because I didn't know. I had no clue. So I'm wondering why my results aren't coming. Well, that's probably the reason, because I'm probably eating 150 grams of fat per day without even realizing it and acknowledging it, for that matter. And then you go into things that were just stupid strategies that bodybuilding coaches or just general fitness coaches would implement, that I tried myself through one period. When I was dieting, I gave myself unlimited greens, and thinking back on it, it's so dumb. Unlimited. There's no cap on the green vegetables that you can have, and it made sense at the time, because you thought, well, greens are probably the lowest calorie or lowest macronutrient vegetable there is, so they don't count, right? Well, in point of fact, they do. Particularly if you have peas. Peas are actually quite high in carbohydrate compared to the others. But, beans, broccoli, zucchini, if you have unlimited and you're hungry, well, you're going to eat a lot of them, okay? I remember going to the supermarket and buying $20 to $30 of just frozen green vegetables. And, people at the checkout would look at you going, what the hell's going on with this guy? It just didn't make sense. So unlimited greens was just stupid. And then when it came to the realization that I wasn't making the progress I needed to, I started capping the greens, and lo and behold, I started seeing progress again, because there was no quantification of how many calories I was having. If you're having 200 grams of beans, 200 grams of peas, 200 grams of broccoli, 200 grams of zucchini, maybe some spinach on top of that, yes, it's all really small in terms of calorie content, but you do that a couple of times a day over the course of 7 days, it adds up. Not to mention the impact it can have on your digestive system too, let me tell you. That was not a fun experience at the end of the week, when you'd be backed up for several days, and then all of a sudden, the floodgates would open. The things we do. And then in the same sort of space of time, I also had a cheat meal window. Now, what this effectively mean was, you diet really hard throughout the week, and then you'd be given a cheat meal for one night. And look, granted, sometimes this is still practiced today. I know there's some professional bodybuilders out there, or just high-end bodybuilders, big guys, enhanced, etc., that still practice this and swear by it. Again, you can't quantify it. I don't like the language around cheat meal. It's a negative term. But for me, in this particular situation, I would be hanging for that week. So my relationship with food was not the greatest. You diet. By the time Friday or Saturday, I can't remember which day came around, you'd be so hungry, you'd be hanging for just sugar and fat, and you'd want the sodium and everything attached to it. And I remember some nights I was eating bags of chocolate and bags of chips. I wasn't even actually having a meal per se. It was just junk food. I remember sitting there with a litre of connoisseur ice cream and 2 Freddo Frogs stuck out of it. And the kids walked by and said, Paul, can we have a Freddo Frog? And I was so fixated on my food. I said, no way. And, we had to justify why I was eating the way I was eating. And so I was setting a very poor example for my kids at the time. And not to mention the fact the relationship with my food was terrible. I must have, and I never quantified what I was eating, but I reckon there would have been a couple of thousand calories in one sitting, just in ice cream and chocolate and chips and I think I was making pizza, and like it was just ridiculous. And you'd have a window, so you'd have like I think 2 hours or something like that. So you'd wolf it down, and you get sick, and then you were ridiculously bloated, and then obviously your bowel movements were terrible. You'd feel awful the next day. You'd feel yuck. Your training performance was affected, but again, didn't matter because 7 days later it'd roll around again. And it was not only, I firmly believe it was affecting my progress, but also my relationship with food was not good, because I remember after that season in particular, the very next day I finished my last show, I didn't stop eating. I could not stop eating, even though I was ridiculously full and I was so full I felt sick. I kept eating. So my brain's telling me one thing, my body's telling me another, and I ended up throwing up all the food I ate that day. I remember it distinctly. I got to a point where I felt so full that it just all came back up. So, all the money I spent obviously was literally money down the toilet, but the relationship with food was just terrible at that point in time. So the strategy in that whole situation was awful. And I'm not a big fan of cheat meals. I haven't been for a long time. I don't like the term cheat. It references doing something bad. Not to mention the fact that there's no quantification around it, So I don't encourage that. I don't support it. I don't condone it. And I certainly don't endorse it with my own clients, just as a bit of a side note. I also went through extensive fasting periods thinking that was better. You'd fast until 1 o'clock in the afternoon thinking, oh, well, I'm utilizing the food I've eaten the night before. I'm chewing into my body fat. But all you're doing is making yourself hungrier. And obviously research has since shown that fasting isn't any superior to normal dieting practices. But the thing it does, unless you're really diligent with your fasting and that you don't overeat on the meals that you do have, people just become too hungry and they end up eating more, right? So it's still it's still based off obviously being in a calorie deficit with just removing 1 or 2 meals from the day, which can be managed, but you've got to be very diligent, very strict. And I remember just constantly doing this. Go for a walk, avoid obviously the kitchen or the home environment for a lengthy period of time so that you weren't tempted to eat, and then you'd obviously eat. But again, I wasn't capping what I was doing. I wasn't controlling the environment, and it wasn't serving me well. If anything, again, my relationship with food was not great. So just another dumb thing that I did. I keep looking through this list and keep laughing at the next point. I used to believe, and I had firm belief in the use of L-carnitine. Now, L-carnitine in theory is actually a really good product. The problem is its bioavailability is so low, it basically serves no purpose when it's consumed orally. The only way presently for it to be highly effective is intravenously, and that's not available to us. So, I was sold on the marketing. It's a fat burner. It promotes fat loss. So great. So I was having it every single day without fail, spending obviously countless amounts of money on something that effectively wasn't doing anything. And they even brought out a grape flavored one. So I was having that. I remember I was having that every single day in one of my preps, thinking, oh, this is obviously working because I'm losing weight. No. The fact that I was dieting was losing weight. The L-carnitine had nothing to do with it. And now I laugh, and it's just not a product that you need to invest in at this point in time, unless they change the opportunity for it to be better available to you from a lower level. I never track milk in my coffee. I'd always have a coffee and not track the milk, And if you have a large, say, latte or cappuccino, there's a good 25 to 30 carbs just there, plus, say, another 5 or 6 grams of fat. It adds up, particularly if you're having a couple of coffees a day. And when you're dieting, you utilize coffee as a means to sort of manage your hunger a little bit better. So I was having countless amounts of coffee. So again, I wasn't including it, I wasn't tracking it, and therefore it was adding up. And again, I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. Oh, this one's a good one. I remember, and I'm going to unfortunately bring my wife into this one because she made the mistake as well. I remember I was deep into a prep at one point, so I was really lean. It was a Sunday, and we were walking through town, and we came across one of those whole food shops where that you can self-serve the quantities of nuts and grains and stuff like that, and they had peanut brittle there. And I was actually on a no carb day, I think. I'm pretty sure it was a no carb day. So back then there was this whole thing about no carb days and no fat days, So you remove obviously a large portion of the calories out of your day by just saying 0 fats or 0 carbs. I'm pretty sure it was a 0 carb day that I was on at that point in time. And I eyeballed the peanut brittle, and I'm a big fan of peanut brittle. And I said to Monty, there's no carbs in peanut brittle, right? Because immediately you think nuts, not the broken down sugar that's completely covering it. And she's at her, in her defense, she didn't know any better either. And she went, oh yeah, no, that's all right. So I grabbed a couple of chunks, bought it and ate it as we were walking. And point of fact, there would have been probably, 100 grams of carbs in what I was eating. So I was on a 0 carb day, but I had 100 grams of carbs in a couple of pieces of peanut brittle because, again, I just didn't know. I was obviously hungry, so you tend to make slightly less smart or logical decisions when you're hungry. But also my knowledge just wasn't as extensive as it is now. And I had a couple of pieces, big, large shards of peanut brittle that would have been easily 100 plus carbs, a couple of hundred calories, easily. So that would have hindered my progress as well. And it was just a dumb thing to do. So yeah, 0 fat days, 0 carb days, they're just things that aren't practiced these days. But back then you were looking for any means necessary to try and get an advantage. So you were coming up with these extreme measures to try and obviously promote fat loss and get you into a lean state, whether it was just normal dieting or obviously contest prep, I've referred to a couple of times here. But then all that hard work upon reflection was getting undone simply through my own lack of knowledge and my own lack of guidance. Oh dear, some things. Yeah, so that's pretty much the entire list that I came up with. But honestly, some of those things were so funny. I even remember going up to, this is way back when, before I got into the industry, I went up to one of the gym managers at Jets, and I said, look, I've been here for 3 months and I'm not making any progress. Can you help me out? Can you point me in the right direction? And he looked me up and down, and he just went, and then he basically handballed me to a PT who wrote me a program. But at that point in time, I was so desperate to see some physical change, I didn't know any better. But knowing now that, okay, you actually need a program to follow first and foremost. You can't just roll into the gym and train whatever you feel like at the time. And in my situation, it was chest and arms, which obviously wasn't promoting enough stimulus or working the entire body. So I wasn't promoting growth, and I wasn't eating in accordance with anything. It was completely, because I think at that stage I was still at home with my parents, so I was eating whatever they were cooking it for dinner, and then I'd obviously go and have Maltesers and up and goes that night thinking I'm bulking, when in point of fact all I was doing was getting fat and sloppy and soft and not promoting anything. And my skinny legs weren't growing because I wasn't training them at all. My chest was getting bigger through just sheer frequency and volume, even though there was no plan or strategy behind the type of training I was doing, and it was just a mess. So it goes to show that you don't know what you don't know. But I don't think in today's age that's an excuse anymore, because there's so much free information, there's so much knowledge, there's so much education, and there's so many professionals around as well that can assist you, whether it's a free consultation, whether it's just a one-off, whether it's ongoing coaching, whether it's sit down and do some mentoring, or whatever the case may be. There's opportunities for you to learn. And as an individual who may not work in the health and fitness industry but wants to make strides with their own health and fitness, I think that's the way to go. Actually, I know that's the way to go. You've got to look to look outside the square in terms and accept the fact that you don't know. If you don't know, that's okay. But learn. Education is so critical these days in terms of professional and personal development. It really is. It plays such a vital role. And if you want to, progress in life, living an optimal lifestyle, so a healthy lifestyle, a fit lifestyle, your internal health is really efficient. There's no illnesses, no injuries, no complications, there's no lethargy, there's no constant tiredness, all these sorts of things that are very common practice. Then if you learn more about nutrition, more about the benefits of regular exercise, sunlight exposure, water intake, stress management, sleep, you're going to put yourself in the box seat to have a really healthy lifestyle. But you've got to want to do it. And that's obviously where a coach can potentially help you as well. Not only from fine tuning the process you're already doing or improving it, but also just keeping you accountable. And I think that there is worth its weight in gold, because we can be very, very lazy as individuals. In groups, we can be even lazier, and as a community, same. So by investing in yourself, you're certainly going to get bang for your buck and reap the rewards of consistency and learning. But I thought that was funny, and I'm sure there's some people listening to this that have a chuckle and think, "Oh my God, what was he doing?" Given I'm now who I am, and obviously hold a strong reputation in the industry and have done so for 10 years. But in the early days, again, you just don't know what you don't know, and until you take it upon yourself to learn more through credible institutions and educational outlets, and obviously get a lot more experience. Unfortunately, that's just what it was at the time. So I'll wrap up there. I hope you enjoyed that one and got a bit of a laugh. I would love to hear any other sort of stories or situations. If you're a listener and you can relate and you said, "Oh, I tried this or I did that," I could do another podcast on maybe listener ones if there's enough of them. So by all means, DM me, email me, comment and share your stories, your disasters, your efforts in wild, dieting strategies, or even training for that matter. So thank you once again for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Once again, further to my point in the previous podcast, I am looking for podcast sponsors. Happy to talk to people about that and the opportunity that it offers in relation to sponsoring the episodes, getting your name across a larger audience, as well as across my social media. And yeah, it's a great opportunity, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a business that's related to health and fitness. I'm open to other avenues as well. I'm a big fan and a big supporter of small business. So if you're a small to medium business out there that wants just another foothold, another market to expose yourself to, this could be the opportunity for you. But once again, thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please screenshot and share it on your stories. Tag myself at Paul's Body Engineering. And if you're interested in any of my coaching services, I have an extensive range now of options there. Jump on my website, paulsbodyengineering.com, or alternatively, jump on the link in the bio of my Instagram page and you'll see all options there. But once again, as I say to every client, every single day, have a great day.